Hello and welcome to Agile Retrospectives, the podcast where we take a retrospective look at Agile. I'm Dan Suchu,
I'm Bogdan Mureșan.
and in today's episode, we are honored to host Anton Skornyakov, a great Agile coach based in Berlin. With over 15 years of experience in roles ranging from developer to managing director, Anton has been involved in guiding organizations of all sizes toward authentic agility. I love this. I really like this expression, authentic agility, and I promise that I will come back later to that. So Anton's passion for enhancing human collaboration and his experience in the field culminate in his book, The Art of Slicing Work, that was published exactly 1 year ago in March 2024. And this book offers practical insights into managing unpredictability in projects across various sectors. So it's not focused only on IT projects. If I remember well, also the subtitle of the book is How to Navigate Unpredictable Project. So it's about unpredictability. So that was just a very quick introduction about you, Anton. But I'm sure there is more to your journey, to your work that we might have missed. So what else would you like to share about yourself?
Maybe one thing I would like to add
Yeah.
is that if you are listening to this, there is one more recent actually publication which is meaningful. I was honored by the Harvard Business Review, the actual magazine that I was able to publish a 4-page article about different stories of what it means to slice work. So it's very easy to understand, and it's basically free. So if you Google for it, you are able to read it for free. So that is maybe a useful start if this conversation that we are having is sounds interesting. There is a way for you to dive a little deeper. Yeah, and I mean, if you're interested in how I became agile coach, shall I say a little bit about that? Something about that.
Of course.
So I used to be a startup founder in Berlin. So after I studied physics and maths, I basically, there is a lot of people like me, like nerds, like and I, right? And we basically had some ideas. It was the time when e-commerce was still on the rise, and there were several thoughts. And in fact, one of the startups that I founded was about managing work, but it was kind of actually the most opposite of agility that you could imagine. And actually, it was Taylorism at its best. It was actually about microtasking and crowdsourcing of work. So, and I was kind of the managing director of that, and also the main salesperson. And in fact, I tried to look for and analyze all the different work that happens in large organizations that can be split up, but not done in a kind of self-organized way, but done in a tremendously micromanagement delegation way. And as you can see, I'm kind of on the other side now. So and I can also give you a couple of stories where I really learned that it doesn't work. Like economically, it doesn't work. It's actually an interesting backstory. But then after I tried to build startups, uh, I had some kids and I needed a different job. I needed a job that would give me money for sure. And so I started to coach other organizations. And what we've done at our startups, what we've done quite well was the systematic use of lean startup. So I kind of, so that's where I come from. I come from like, even though I'm kind of, I did code and I can code it, that's not where my kind of home is at. I'm much more of a CEO of an organization, you could say product perspective, product owner perspective, and I supported organizations as a coach, as a product coach, and then at some point it came along people who did professional Scrum trainings, certified Scrum trainings, and I realized that a lot of the things that I was kind of inventing with every customer, trying to explain to them all the things in Lean Startup, that there is a whole bunch of these things that already exists like for a couple of decades, and I basically joined this large road of becoming a certified Scrum trainer, which I think I became like 6 or 7 years ago, and Well,
And also, this thing, as you said, that your background is in physics and mathematics,
mhm.
and both of them are built on rigid laws and precise formulas, isn't it? Agile, on the other hand, tries with adaptability, flexibility. How do you
Yeah,
reconcile these two
yeah.
worlds?
Yeah. So the part of maths and physics that I was involved in is called statistical physics or probability theory in math. So
Okay, okay.
so basically what I was studying mostly were random processes, which is exactly what we're talking about. So in fact, I'm not doing anything today that is connected like scientifically to what I've been studying. However, the intuition, the kind of the gut feeling of what is going on and what kind of things do work or do not work. Like it's sometimes when I question myself, like where does this feeling come from, or why are you so sure about that? When I think about it, I come back to, oh well, because you've studied this kind of random processes at some time, and so there is a certain intuition that comes from it. And there is, I mean, we could go into queuing theory and a lot of things that are at the core of what we do as agile coaches, but in fact, today, and that's maybe this is our segue into the slicing. I'm in the agility. I'm not really that much interested in those areas of what are the role descriptions and what meetings do we have, because I don't like these things are very, you can change them, and but what you but there's certain things that cannot change, and those are the things that I'm really interested in, and I believe this this book of mine, or this perspective of mine of how do you structure work, is one part of it. I believe this is maybe the core part. So if this is a result of our conversation today, that you can get out of here and realize or agree with me that this is the core part. Like if you are able to structure your work differently, all of the other things like meetings and roles, they will fall into place. So that's kind of the thing that we want to show. That's basically my agenda that that
Mhm,
I'm
mhm.
that I'm trying to put out there.
In fact, what you have just stated, it was one of the curiosity and revelations for me as I came across your book because during my history and our history, because me and Dan are working together for for a lifetime for more than 20 years.
Mm,
And we got in contact with the agile world a long time ago. And in the beginning, like I was very passionate about all this world of agile world, the way of thinking and so on, and how you get into it. It's you get into it through the rules and some recipes and and so on. What very soon I noticed that people are way too attached about what you mentioned about ceremonies and roles and so on, and they forget exactly the core. And the core is just the part that you're mentioning and how you structure your thinking and your work in a different way. And started to change the my perception and how I try to change the perception of others towards this. And it's for somebody who's used to doing a very sequential or very structured way or a very planned way, it's
mm,
very hard to understand that there is another way of dealing with uncertainty. There is another way of dealing with your work. There is another way of getting something on the market and learn from it, and so on. And I read your book with a lot of interest on how basically you manage to explain this concept in a way that is very easy to digest and to understand. It was
thank you so much.
literally a great pleasure for me to see. Wow, it's cool. It's a book which I would recommend for a lot of people to read, even with people with a lot of experience, because it gives you that small insight that you need to, if you haven't done it until then, to start to change your perception, your mindset, the way you are thinking. And one of the first thing that came to my mind, like you, Anton, have worked with a lot of organizations
Mm,
and a lot of people. In through these people, how many product people have you met which are great at thinking at the business, knowing the business inside out, knowing the market, know what they have to do, but have real problem of slicing the work and actually thinking in this way?
That's a hard truth question. I'll be honest with you. So because being a trainer and I would estimate that I met maybe, I don't know, something around between 3 and 5,000 people, like professionally talking about these topics in my life. And I would say, so there is different stages. So there is a lot of people who basically get to know agility, and then for them, there is a lot of revelation, and they kind of need to wrap their head around this concept of working in a different way. And I mean, they're not experts in slicing. I mean, the thing is, all of us, so I start the book with this dinner example, right? And all of us are quite natural at slicing when it comes to rather simple work. So that's why it's the book is not so much explaining the world completely anew as but just giving you a certain perspective with which you can look at what happens in the real world, so you can recognize the patterns that you can reuse when you're working on large software or non-software projects. And so what happens to those people who are new, they kind of spin their head around differently. So but they're not yet experienced. So they're not masters. Then I get to know a lot of people who have been in the agile world for like 4 or 5 years, and for most of them, this is quite intuitive. So when it comes to work, they kind of intuitively start slicing. Very often, they do not recognize this as a skill in itself, and they do not recognize its importance. So it's kind of, when I talk to them, they think about the role, they think about what is about the accountability and ownership and responsibility, and all of those things that actually are painful from day to day in everyday work, but they're kind of intuitively already understanding the concept of slicing. And every time I explain to them, they kind of, well, that's kind of self-understood, but now that I see this as a known kind of a certain perspective, I realize how this is kind of guiding everything else. Yeah. And then there are people who are, I would say, who actually have the authority in those organizations. And for them, and they're kind of a certain different species, because they typically do not recognize, if, like, I used to be a manager as well, and I know that there is a huge amount of different buzzwords that are just running around in the management world. And if you've been there for more than 5 years, you know that none of the buzzwords is as great as and none of and a lot of things are not new. That's also something you learned, and you kind of become very careful about trusting any new buzz or anything, any new thing. So when these guys, they may even have had Scrum or Agile trainings or introductions and so forth and so forth, but they, for them, it's kind of a messy thing, right? In the end, it's about people. It's about whom can I trust? What decision do I make? And for them, so you could expect them to be actually experts in slicing, but they're not. So that's at least what I kind of noticed. So when I ask them about, because they are the sponsors of projects, they are the people owning the budget. When I ask them, so what is the result that you're going to see when this or this project works out in half a year? Say, how do you know in a 2-year project, in a half a year, that it's actually on track? And most of the time, like 99% of the time, the answer, even from an executive who will know the principles of agility and the incremental approach, they will still give you an answer. Well, I guess in half a year we will have this and this documentation agreed up with all these important stakeholders, and maybe we will have something testable already running there. But then we will just start doing. And there is, I don't know how many projects there are that are always created with this thinking in people's minds that, we are building something, and then at some point we will change the lever, we will kind of turn the button on, and the new thing is going to work, and the old thing is just going to be old and replaced. And this thinking is just crazy how often you find it. It's crazy how much waste is created by this thinking, because it's this, like, if you're listening to this and you realize I don't know what is wrong about it, well, guess, like, less than 10% of projects that are created like that are successful. Just like, if you think that you're doing a 2-year project or something similar, a software project where you change some software that people use in sales or some other process, and you hope that you will be able to complete it at some point, turn it on and turn the old thing off, it's not going to work. Just, I'm sorry, that's just the empirical data. And so that is quite shocking to me. And to be honest, to a certain point, and that's kind of, so a lot of people who are experts in the agile world, even when I kind of submit, I don't know, talks and conferences, they read through what I'm writing, and they say, well, but Anton, that is all old. Like, this is, we all know what this is. Like, the splitting, it's old, right? MVPs, we know all these concepts. It's all, why are you talking to us? But then I think, well, guys, the thing is, I don't know, Scrum has been invented 90s, right? 91, 92 were the first Scrum teams. So we are 35 years into the making, and we still, like, most of the organizations that claim to be agile are not, right?
That's very true. That's very
Yeah.
true.
And the question is, what? So there is something we're not getting. There's something about, and when I say we, I mean the crowd that is coaching, right? The trainer and coaches crowd. Something we're not getting in our approach. And I believe, from my point of view, this is this, and the focus on results. The focus on results is what is able to bring together the needs of the higher management, those people who are giving the money, and the actual process people. So this is the perspective we need to own. This is the perspective, and it is not a simple perspective. That's why it's such a, like this book, and a lot of examples are needed. It is easy to say, well, let's just deliver something that we can learn from within 2 weeks. But what is it? Like, what is it that you can actually deliver of a 2-year project after 2 weeks that you can actually have useful learning with? That is not an obvious question. And in order, and we need to get, I think this is the hard skill. If we can master this hard skill, if we can make the conversation about this, we will be able to have way more organizations that are adaptable.
That's very true. And one thing that I found it, like, I like it a lot, was the focus on the behavioral change, because way too much, even through what you explain, we think a lot of the times of, okay, what are the means to that we get up there, and it becomes easy to quantify. Like, I produce the documentation, it's like a check, it's there, but it's easy to quantify. Like, okay, how many people are actually reading the documentation, how they are using it, if it helps them, and so on. And yeah, it's harder to focus and to measure on that. But I like a lot, like, that thinking that what I'm doing should produce some impact, and where is that impact that it's producing. And yeah, I met something similar in the OKRs theory, and I like it a lot. And when I met it, like, it changed a little also my perspective on that side. So seeing your perspective also on the slicing work, for me it was, whoa, it's cool. It's we should think more of this, on how we actually, on what actually we are focusing on to achieve, and how do we measure that we achieve that. If you would have, like, to give an insight related to that, not too much, because still the people need to read the book. We
Oh
believe that
no, I
very
think
useful for them.
mhm. I mean, so yeah, I'm not a big fan of large processes, so that's why I kind of just take one skill and just talk about it. And what you've just given, this difference between what are we focusing on, some technical result, or well, I have some functionality and this functionality works, when that's great, but that's typically not the result of software. So especially when you are building software and you're listening to this, most of the time software is not the actual result. The result that you want to get, the outcome that you want to get out of the software that you build is that someone is using it, and by using it is changing something, right? So most organizations today are dealing, or large organizations today are dealing with some kind of digitization effort, right? So for example, their customer relationship or their sales or some internal processes, they're changing. And very often they have some old system that is really painful to use, and then there is a new system that someone's creating that is better to use, I guess, right? So now you could say, well, my progress is done if you are able to sign up a new client on the new software. Right now, the sign up is done, right? I'm great. Well, are you? Are you really done then this way? And what you just said, Bogdan, right? So focusing on changing the behavior would be to say, well, I only have made progress when I see that people actually that maybe someone internally signs up new clients using the new software. And that immediately pops up the question, and that's a little bit connected to the example that I made before. Like, if we want our new software, if we want to check the fact that we actually achieved something by our new software being in use, that means we have to release it somewhere. We need to actually have someone working on it. And sure, we can do that in a kind of test drive way. However, if we, I would say, if we take the bitter pill from the beginning, and we simply accept the fact that in order to change from one system to another, or from many, many, many old systems to one new, or whatever, from anything old to new, there is going to be some time when two systems will exist at the same time. And and what will happen is an incremental change from using the old system for 100% of all cases to using the new system for 1% of cases and the old system for 99, and and then this proportion will grow, and at some point the old system will stop to exist and not be used anymore, and the new system will be the only one existing. And so what happens when you kind of take this bitter pill and accept the fact that this is going to happen? You get the ability to have completely incremental change to use the new system in action. So I don't know, whatever the system is, sign up new clients, contact them, change some data, whatever it is, or create invoices, whatever it is that you are using your system for. So and this will allow you to see whether people are actually doing it. So whether you are actually able to change the behavior. And since you are able to change the behavior, success. Or no, people are not using it the way I thought. There is surprises. Actually, customers have different kind of data. We cannot use them with the new system, and those surprises will pop up immediately. Like this sounds really obvious, right, to someone who has been in the agile world for a long time. But this idea that you have to accept the fact that two systems are going to be there at the same time, and you're go from one to the other, that is the bitter pill that you need to explain to the management. And maybe that is why this book is written. Like it's so simple and so easy to digest in order to be digestible by typical managers, so that they understand this is simple truth. This is not something big, but this is hard truth. It's simple, but it's hard to accept, and it creates hard questions that you need to answer.
Yeah, it will be cool to make a measure on how many software they have like features, which at one point somebody was very sure like, oh, this feature will break the customers and the market and so on. And
Yeah.
1 year later, when you actually see the usage, you see that barely one out of 1 million customers has touched that feature, which was a sure thing at that moment.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah, going back to simple things and natural behavior, I love this idea that in the kitchen, when we slice bread or onions or anything else, the most natural way is to cut vertical. Slicing horizontally just doesn't feel right, isn't it? So why is it that when it comes to product development, thinking in vertical slices feels so unnatural and difficult, at least at the beginning? For so many software developers, they always think in horizontal slices.
Yeah. Let's introduce a little bit what it means, right? So when you cut,
Of course.
when you imagine a simple feature, right? You have, I don't know, a website, and you want to allow for people to sign up for newsletter, all right? So very simple, something very simple. So a vertical slice would be to say, well, you are able to send newsletters without anyone even being signed up. If you hack their email address directly into your database, they will be able to receive a newsletter, right? But you can actually see the newsletter email arriving at someone, and that would be the CRUD, right? So where we start with a read, basically. So the data, we basically put the data in, and then it's read, it's kind of used. And then the second vertical slice would be you enable people to actually sign up for the newsletter. And then the next, you would enable them to edit their data that is saved and delete. So those would be 4 typical vertical slices of this whole newsletter thing. Now, typically, when you talk to a not so sophisticated developer or someone who is not familiar with agility, they would think about creating the whole newsletter. So they would think about, well, what do I need? What do I need to create in the backend, and all the different layers of my backend, and what do I need to have in the front end? And then they will basically start doing that. And now your question is, why do developers start thinking like that? And I don't think that developers are in particular anything special. I think whenever I speak to any expert in their field, they are automatically thinking about, well, what do I need to do? Like if I have a chair that I want to build, and I go to someone, to a craftsman, they will also think automatically about the different steps that they want to need to perform in order for the chair to be there. So it's a very natural kind of thinking when you are used to break up your work in the different to-dos. So that's very natural. And it's actually I call it a generalist skill to start breaking things up. And it also comes with one obvious thing. If you expect all of your plans to work out, right? You don't need vertical slicing. You could plan everything up front, and then you can move on and create it. But when you've worked in software for long enough, when you've had your share of such experiences, like Bogdan just said, right, where you develop something, you put all of your heart into it, and then no one uses it, or the way people use it is very different from what you thought, and they end up having very different comments, and you realize you misunderstood them, or well, when you have all of this kind of experiences, you realize it's much better thing to not assume that everything you understood is right, and just deliver little pieces and get feedback, right? And it's not just people who not, or you not understanding what they want. Like from my point of view, actually, this is very often something people sometimes most of the thing people talk about is customers not knowing what they want. But in my experience, when it comes to software development, it's actually very often a very different kind of uncertainty that we have. Is most of us are building software on top of other software that is built on top of other software that is built on top of other software, and there is like updates and APIs that are so different and inconsistent and incompatible, and something you find out only after a month of working on it, that you know different layers of what you've built are just not working together. Yeah, in my trainings there is there is a great YouTube channel. I'll make a little. It's called Primitive Technology. I like there's a guy out there in the country, and he's building kind of technology without having anything up front. And he basically is building everything incrementally because he cannot rely on the clay to be solid enough. He cannot rely on any stick to be solid enough. And so that's very similar to what we're doing when we're creating software. We're building it with components that we don't know whether they will perfectly work. And we cannot because everything develops so fast.
We need to do this because you wrote about the unpredictability and how it comes on the plate, and especially in these environments, it's very interesting because unpredictability can came, as you stated, from different, like I would say, places or directions,
Mhm.
humans, competition, and so on.
Mhm.
And my conclusion after I read, like putting my thoughts together, was that basically you beat this unpredictability, and what we are trying to do a lot of the times with proof of concepts, with testing hypotheses, not with full blasted feature, pixel perfect, detailed in all the ways possible, released after 6 months,
Mhm.
because it's really, really, really hard to do that. And I like how you describe the um, um, ways on which you can test. I- 3 or 4 ways there were there. Like you can test your idea without actually fully implement it.
Mm.
Can
Mhm.
explain for our listeners
Uh-huh.
what exactly for
Yeah.
one of these ways of very
Mhm.
interesting.
So in the end of the book, there is a little guide on how to slice. It's not complete by no means, but it's that there are certain parts of this process that you could say are craftsmanship, and certain parts of this process that are art. And so one of the steps is to basically map out what you are doing and kind of look for things that are most risky and find what you want to start with. And very often when we do this, like when we ask ourselves what do we want to start with, we still end up defining the first result that is way too big. It's just not small enough so that we can deliver it within 2 weeks. And now the question is, how do we reduce it? What are some ways that we can reduce it? And right. So in the process of how it is built up in the book, there are certain steps that you can where you can look into and kind of and make a certain decision there. For example, to narrow down your target audience, that allows you to dramatically reduce the effort for the first slice. Sometimes what you have to do is to reduce the impact that you want to have. So let's say, so one of the examples in the book is uh, that you want, so some people from a governmental organization, they want to test whether people would behave in a certain way if they were given an option to behave like that. Now, normally, a government would plan this and they would have a legal test, and that would take a long time. However, here they are able to simply create a one-pager document and basically directly go to people, offer them whatever they want to offer them, and that uh, this kind of tool of reducing the impact is called do things that don't scale. And in fact, it comes from startup, very famous for startup um, uh, what you call supporter consultants, the guy who created the Y Combinator, Paul Graham. And there are also different names for this. So this is like some people other call it concierge prototype. But the main idea is basically do things that don't scale. That's why I like the name, because it actively says what you have to do in order to test things. So just forget about scaling things. Just try to immediately create it. Postpone, for example, automation, right? So very often I'm working with people who try to do something and their main idea is, well, we're going to have some great AI behind it, right? So today, a lot of AI. Like, why don't you have human eye, right? So human intelligence sitting there first, and they will basically, uh, the first 100 customers get this human service. And if the human is able to create, like an expert human is able to create some traction and customers like whatever you offer, then you have some data that you can also train your AI with after the first 100 cases. Um, so again, this is called do things that don't scale. Another idea also comes from the lean startup world. However, it's not just for like my purpose is to say it's not just about product or even business development, but the idea is called fake door prototype. So basically, instead of actually building something, you create a door. You say, here you can get X, whatever X is, and then you measure if anyone notices this, like if you're able to notice, like to measure what people notice, or you measure how many people actually click on it or use it, right? And the X does not have to be a product. It can be part of your service. It can be an enhancement. It can be some change. I like there's a great book, The Lean Entrepreneur. There is a great example about a guy who created a new technology in chemistry, I think, and it had 20 different application fields. So what he's done is he created 20 different little ads that are not online, but in a magazine for chemists, and he measured, and each ad had a different telephone number. And he measured basically what telephone number was called and how often. And this way he knew what of the 20 application fields would be most useful to start with, right? But so that's basically startups, but you can also you can do the same thing when when you're talking like about again, this is even an example from Eric Ries, the author of the Lean Startup, where he talks about service of you know um, a support telephone. Like when for example people are lonely and they're thinking about suicide, like it's better that they can call somewhere, right? Now there is the government wants to help, they want to prevent suicide, but they don't know what kind of advertisement and where does this advertisement have to be in order for people to notice it in those critical moments. And so you could say, well, they create a long concept, or they will just take a little space in one particular area that is more or less a great example for the whole country, and they will test different kinds of ads there, and they will see how many people actually call the number and what happens. So, and by doing that, they are able to do very quick, very informative tests that allows them afterwards to be much more impactful when delivering this service to the public in the whole country. Right. So yeah, those are some of the examples, and yeah, I can also like the difficulty about this topic, and you already maybe notice if you're listening to this, every time we talk about slicing, we need to talk about the specifics of a certain industry, of a certain product, or of a certain service. You cannot give an example of slicing without diving into a certain topic. And most of us, we work in the same organizations for like 5 years, so we're kind of blind to this. What industry are we in? And that's why kind of you need to get a lot of examples to get your brain working, to get your ideas to start them growing. Bogdan, I hope it's okay. I kind of took your question and
Oh,
deviated, I think.
it's perfect, and you
Yeah.
actually stated my favorite one, like do the
Mhm.
things not scalable, because both on me and Dan are coming from a heavy technical background, and the
Mm.
like the mindset of the technical person is like uh, you build it from the beginning to be scalable, to extend, to reuse
Mhm.
it, to so on and so on, and actually you never got back to most of the things that you prevented, and you lost a lot of energy, time, and so and doing, and it's somehow for the technical, for other technical people in the past was counterintuitive to like make it way simpler and easier to digest, and it's easier even to extend it if it's way simpler from the beginning.
However, it requires different skill, right? So if you're like if I am like I'm a terrible coder, I have to say, because the last time I've written code is quite a long time ago, and I remember what it felt like, and I didn't know how to code well in those days, and if you would have asked me how to create things, like for example, one of the best, maybe I would add this, one of the best patterns that I know of for creating large software in slices is called walking skeleton. To create a walking skeleton, you can Google that, or it's called also tracer bullet. And if you asked me to create a walking skeleton, I would have to redo all of my work from phase one to do phase two to do phase three. My code wouldn't be reusable. So, because I wasn't aware of all of those clean coding, principles and how you would do that and those patterns. I just wasn't. So, so, and that's also one of the reasons I believe in the software industry we had large problems with agility, because we had a huge demand for software developers, like I think until 2 or 3 years ago, before the AI came up. There was a huge need for software developers, and lots of the people that I met working in organizations, they did it like in their first years, and they did not have any experience in what it means to maintain a product that is there for 10 years. They were great at creating things in the green field, but they just did not have any experience in what it means to maintain something. And and when you are like that, you just don't know that it actually matters. You don't know that those practices matter a lot.
It's true.
Yeah. Nice. Guys, I want to completely change the topic, because I really want to talk about this. There was one thing I love so much in your book that I already used it in some of my speeches and courses, and it's about roundabout metaphor. So that roundabout metaphor that stood out to me, because it challenged my own belief that self-organizing teams require people to know each other well beforehand. And in your example, strangers quickly and efficiently navigate the system without any prior coordination.
Mhm.
Now, could you briefly describe this metaphor for our listeners? And what can leaders do to create the conditions where self-organizing or self-organization happens just as naturally?
Mhm. Yeah,
Is
thank
it
you.
so
That's
simple?
exactly what I'm using this metaphor for in the book, is to explain the difference between self-organized and actually managed behavior, and the amount of energy it needs. In fact, I have to say it's not my metaphor, so I've also picked it up from somewhere, and that's something I love about our industry. In my book, I try to kind of quote everybody that I know that I've taken something from, but I also know that we have so many things that people just created and talked about, and so right. So the metaphor is, you basically you have crossroads, right? And you need cars not to crash. And now, as a city planner, you have to decide, do you want to have traffic lights there, or do you want to have a roundabout? And there are different reasons why you may decide for one or for the other. However, the roundabout does not need energy. It's just there, right? It creates the constraints for the cars, how they should move, and it relies on people taking responsibility for their cars not to crash. There is a little preparation, right? Because most people who drive cars, they've taken courses on how to drive cars, and they kind of trained that before, right? So that's, without that it wouldn't work. So they kind of have to know the rules, but that's enough, right? You can rely on them knowing the rules and not wanting to crash with someone else. While a traffic light, it requires energy to run. It needs to be programmed. And if, at some roads there is different amounts of traffic going there, in an hour when people come back from work. And so traffic lights have actually quite sophisticated programming sometimes behind them. And you have to think about what happens if the traffic light doesn't work, right? Because it sometimes breaks down. And all of those things need to, you have to think about them up front. You need to invest energy continuously. You have to maintain the thing. You may have to repair. Like this is a lot of energy that you need to use to get actually the same thing done as you do with a roundabout. And so that's basically a metaphor. If you are able to create conditions in your organization where people are able to make decisions on their own, it's just so much. You don't have to use all this overhead. Yeah. And how is it connected to the topic that we're talking about? Most of the time when managers, especially young managers, are experts at something, they would, for example, as a developer, I would take this newsletter sign up thingy and I would say, well, you are really good at backend. Why don't you create a backend that is doing this, and this is how the interface should work. And you are a great front end guy. Come on, I need a front end that does this and this and this and this. And then you're a great designer. Why don't you take this kind of front end and make it really pixel perfect? And you would delegate this work. You would have to look into people actually, integrating this work with each other. If it doesn't work, you would have to think, well, who's made a mistake? Who is wrong here, right? And all of this delegation and overhead, this is something that you can get rid of if you tell these people instead of, what they have to do, all those horizontal tasks, if you just tell them in the end, I would like to have a sign up for a newsletter. And if when people sign up, and I enter a newsletter there, they actually get the email. So I just describe the result that even a customer would be able to see. It doesn't require me to have any knowledge about programming to do that. And I will test whether you've done a good job by testing it like a customer would. And I don't care. Well, I actually do care, but it's up to you how you coordinate with each other. And that creates conditions where people ask themselves, well, how do we self-organize? And then they create, common agreements and so forth. And there's a couple of more examples in the book. There's one that is even, I think, stronger. If sometimes there is a lot of organizations, and it gets this is the bigger, the larger the organizations are, there is a lot of organizations, and like 90% of what they do is overhead. 90% of what they do is to manage work that does not need management, that people would know how to do if you just let them do it. But it's kind of how there is more intercompany dynamics that we could. I don't think we have the time to go into, but why this happens. But in order to kind of break it, if you don't want to talk about why does it happen, but if you are interested in how can I get out of this, you need to start giving people vertical slices of work.
Yeah.
But also you need to fight with your fears, with your fear of losing control, with your trust in people, and a lot of challenges are coming from there.
Absolutely, and this is why our topic is always hard facts and soft facts, and you have to trust them much less if you are able to slice really thin, because then you can rely on them showing you the result after 1 week, instead of 1 month. You can course correct. You can have them learn much faster. That's why this skill is so important. Kind of the thin, the small slicing is, I believe, at the core.
And for this, I will also state my favorite thing from the book, because you need to give feedback. And
Yeah.
the thing that it was very interesting 2 years ago at the Agile conference, where me and Dan were on a stage with Peter Leeson, and Peter asked like everybody in the room. There were a couple of hundred of people in there, and like, how many you are Agile? No, yeah, we are Agile. And how many of you actually get feedback from the user? And there were two people raising their hands.
Oh my gosh.
200. And in your book, you are saying about, and this what strike me, is one of my favorite things, like create the feedback infrastructure.
Yeah.
We are talking a lot of the times about the feedback and how important it is in not only from the end user, the clients, the customers, whatever, but also we need to create the proper tools in order to get this
Yeah.
feedback and to be able to give feedback faster to the teams based on the thin vertical slices, and basically switch the course as it needed. I found it that like a really, really a powerful statement. Feedback infrastructure, very, very
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. That's the big work of managers. So when managers ask, what do I do in this agile organization? You have a lot of hard answers in this book. They're different. Like you do not make decisions that often. Very, very rarely you make decisions. But what you do is you create a feedback infrastructure. Hmm.
Yep.
And I mean, what it means is basically you already have a pool of people that you can ask for feedback, so teams can do it very easily. It depends very much on any organization. There is also a couple of examples I think in the book that I'm giving of hard organizations, like organizations who had a hard time actually getting feedback, and how they overcome this.
That the discussion was very, very interesting until now, and the time flew. I hope that you have time for a conclusion. Uh, Before we close it, I personally didn't notice what the time is. I think we overcome those 45 minutes that
Yes,
Ben stated
that's
in the
true.
beginning.
Yeah. Well,
So
I love this conversation. I heard how many parts of the book you loved, and I'm very passionate about talking about all of them, and I could be talking for them
It
for
was a
days.
valuable feedback for you.
Thank you. Yes, very positive. Thank you.
Okay,
yes, and
thank you
we
also.
would have said if something would have really bothering or or so. So
Mm,
this is good. But if you would like to have to um, leave one thing for our listeners before we close, what would be that conclusion, that thing for the listeners
mm,
related to vertical
mm.
slicing, the art of slicing work?
Related to the art of slicing work. Um, I think my advice would be if what you've heard today in this session inspired you, ask yourself in the project that you're currently working on, just for like 5 minutes, if it's if half a year has gone by, what things could have gone wrong? Just take 5 minutes to collect these things, and then take 5 minutes to think what of the things that you've written down is really, really, like, truly scary, like truly possible, and endangering what you're doing, and what could you deliver to reduce this risk. Like, if you can take just this one very practicable like structure from this call, you will do yourself and your organization a lot of good.
Awesome. This is great. Thank you so
Thank you. We'd
much.
like to sincerely thank you, Anton, for sharing your valuable insights with us. I really hope our listeners found this discussion just as insightful as we did. So stay tuned for more episodes. Until next time, and keep fostering the agile mindset. Thank you so much.